We're supposed to read that in what, one night? These guys talk about the so-called socialist utopia as if it was a bad thing when polls repeatedly show that the core ideas of what progressives are actually proposing are overwhelmingly popular with voters. In fact, that's why they're opposed to rebalancing our democracy, because if we do, those popular ideas have a much better chance of becoming a law. Republicans are like substitute teachers who threaten to punish their class by putting on a movie instead of continuing with the lesson plan. Look, if you guys don't want to learn fractals, then I'll have no choice but to make you watch Amadeus on Laserdisc. And looking at the back here, it says there's adult language and brief nudity. Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of hands for fractals. Of course, it won't shock you to learn that Republicans don't actually have any convincing principled arguments against DC statehood, because there aren't any. They act like there have been exactly 50 states in the Union since 1776, which obviously isn't the case. In fact, rural states have done the same thing throughout history to grow their own political power. In 1889 and 1890, Congress added North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Washington, Idaho, and Wyoming, the largest admissions of states since the original 13. The addition of 12 new senators and 18 new electors to the Electoral College was a deliberate strategy of late 19th century Republicans to stay in power after their swing toward big business cost them a popular majority. The strategy paid dividends deep into the future. Indeed, the admission of so many rural states back then helps to explain GOP control of the Senate today, 130 years later. Exactly. You think the framers envisioned when they wrote the Constitution? Those dorks barely knew where the Dakotas were. Back then, they just rode one horse until it died and then typed onto another one. And that only got you to West Boston. And back then, West Boston was not a neighborhood you wanted to get lost in. Bro, you lost? I'm not lost. I'm Benjamin Franklin, and I was born here. I don't know you, bro. You live here now? No, I moved to Philadelphia. Oh, you moved to Philly. All right, bro. I'm going to need your waistcoat and your knee braces. I invented electricity. Well, I invented, I don't care. Where were we? Oh, right, present day. In fact, Republicans have so few legitimate arguments that last month during a hearing on the D.C. statehood bill, Congressman Jody Hice, who incidentally is the Trump-backed candidate for Secretary of State in Georgia, running on the big lie that the state was stolen from Trump, made this absolutely ludicrous argument.
Under this bill, D.C. would in fact become the first among states, which is exactly what our founders sought to avoid. D.C. would be the only state without an airport, without a car dealership, without a capital city, without a landfill, without even a name on its own, and we could go on and on and on.
It's hard to know where to even begin with that. A full list of fact checks would be at least 14 pages long. We can't do that. It would take Marjorie Taylor Greene an entire day to read it. First of all, there are car dealerships in D.C. You don't need to be like a geography teacher to know that little tidbit. Just look for one of those goofy tube men flapping his arms on the side of the road. Of course, if this moron ever saw one of those guys, he'd probably think it was a distressed motorist. You need a ride? Man, hop in the back. I'm listening to the recording of the glory days. All right. Oh yeah. They'll pass you by. Second, D.C. does have a name, right? I mean, when you go on kayak, there's not an option to stay in hotels near the National Mall and you know where. Trump himself is thankfully gone, but as we've seen yet again this week, both the ideology and performance of Trumpism is still very much the core of the modern GOP. They've spent the last few days trotting out incredibly dumb lies about everything from D.C. statehood to voting rights to the Green New Deal, and yet no matter how many times they miss, they won't stop taking. This has been a crazy run. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaccinated. We love you.
Christmas is all about?
To the family we're born with, and to the family we make along the way.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has promised a scorched earth Senate if Democrats change the filibuster to pass sweeping and urgently needed democracy reforms as Republicans across the country unleash a tidal wave of draconian new voting restrictions motivated by the big lie that Donald Trump was the real winner of the 2020 election. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. democracy is currently constituted is simply not a level playing field. In fact, it's arguably never been a level playing field. It's heavily tilted toward a minority of voters that are predominantly white and rural, in large part to impact majoritarian institutions like the Electoral College and the Senate. Just consider that right now the Senate is evenly split 50-50, and yet the 50 Senate Democrats represent nearly 42 million more Americans than the 50 Senate Republicans. For example, Wyoming, with a population of about 580,000 people, has 2 senators, and New York also has 2 senators, even though there are 580,000 people just on my co-op board, which is why I'm still waiting on approval for the welcome mat I bought in 2002. Think about that, 42 million more Americans. That's just an insane fact. Like, if every touchdown the Jets scored was worth 42 points, they wouldn't make the playoffs, but they'd be in more close games. I mean, just consider the scope of how heavily tilted our democratic institutions are toward Republicans. They've only won the popular vote once in the last 32 years, yet they've appointed a majority of Supreme Court justices. They've lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million. In 2016, lost the House by the largest margin since Watergate. In 2018, lost 2 Senate seats in historically red Georgia this year, and yet Mitch McConnell still basically gets a veto over what the Senate can or cannot pass. The only way the Senate can get anything done right now is through a process called budget reconciliation, which has more rules than a Manhattan parking sign. No parking except for days ending in Y during odd-numbered leap years. Unless you're a white van with no license plate, then for some reason you can park wherever the you want. Seriously, what is that? I stop in to grab a prescription, I get a ticket, but this van has actual weeds growing up through the wheel well? All right. The Democrats were able to pass their massively popular COVID relief bill through reconciliation, but thanks to the Senate parliamentarian and a bunch of absurd rules no one understands, they had to drop their proposal for a $15 minimum wage. Trying to pass legislation through budget reconciliation is like trying to play some obscure board game your most annoying friend brought back from Europe. It's called Viking Quest. You role play as a Nordic sea commander searching for gold coins buried in trenches. Whenever you search a trench, you get an action card, which adds to your skill table, allowing you to trade for cargo, which you can use to score victory points. And whoever scores the most victory points gets to leave board game night and go home. It's from the same company that makes Ocean Master. They also make NyQuil with 2 L's. Keeps you up. So the deck is already stacked heavily in the Republicans' favor, and yet because they still got swamped in the 2020 elections, they're trying to make it even harder for Americans to vote. State election officials across the country expanded mail and early voting in 2020 because of the pandemic. And by the way, if you judge the health of a democracy not by the results, but by how many people voted, it was a huge success. Voter fraud was virtually non-existent. As has been the case for decades, even as turnout was the highest in over a century. You know how everyone's always complaining about low voter turnout in America? 2020 showed us how to fix it. Just make voting easier. Let people vote at their convenience, either in person or by dropping off a ballot in the mail. Voting should take a few minutes tops. Everything else has gotten easier in America. Why not voting? Remember when your mom used to have to call the Mexican restaurant to order delivery? Now there are a million apps, which is great because you don't have to hear her pronounce the L's in quesadilla. I'd like a quesadilla with guacamole. And yet, to register to vote, you have to bring like 3 forms of ID to the county registrar and some government building you've never even seen before that looks like the crawl space from Being John Malkovich. And it shouldn't be on Tuesday or day. Now, some may argue that Monday's worse, but would you prefer Memorial Day to fall on a Tuesday? You wouldn't, because Tuesday's if you said to a friend, we should get dinner soon, and they said, how about Tuesday? You'd say, how about you right off? And don't start on Wednesday. I'd trade 100 Tuesdays for 1 Wednesday. Hump day? Tuesday's chump day. Anyway, the point is voting should be as easy as possible, and everyone should automatically be enrolled or have the ability to enroll on Election Day.